Title: The Poetry of the Ice Lady. Once upon a time, in Ise, when the Lady of Ice was still a young girl and had not yet become a lady of the court, she resided at the home of the consort of the Seventh Ward. During this time, the young minister of the left, still a minor official, secretly visited her. Despite his efforts to remain discreet, his presence was faintly perceived by others. Later, when the young minister ceased his visits and his absence was noted, he composed the following poem and sent it to her, expressing his feelings. If only I could be forgotten without leaving a trace, I would be lamenting having no name to speak of. Upon receiving this poem, the young minister, moved by its sentiment, may have thought it pitiable. Consequently, he decided to reveal himself and returned, deeply resolved to remain by her side. Thus, the story has been passed down. Title: The poem sent by Uno Saduki. Once upon a time, when Oino Saduki was serving as the governor of Mima, life became harsh and food was scarce. During the rainy season in May, a woman came to his house selling mirrors. Saduki, curious, took a look and found that the mirror was encased in a 5-inch square box with intricate yellow makie designs on a lacquered background, wrapped in fragrant mutsu paper. Upon opening the box, he found a thin sheet of paper inside with a poem written in delicate script. Until today, with tears in my eyes, I have come to know the mirror's shadow. Do not tell anyone of this. Moved by the poem and feeling a deep sense of empathy, Saduki, having developed a resolve to follow the way of virtue, wept greatly. He then loaded 10 koku of rice onto a cart, returned the mirror to the seller, and sent the cart along with the woman. He included a reply poem in the mirror's box, but did not disclose the content of his response. The cart was sent along with the woman. It is said that the reply was placed in a rough-hewn hinoki bark house on the edge of Gogojo no Koji, but it is not known whose house it was. Thus, the story has been passed down. Title: The Poem of the Woman on the 15th of July. Once upon a time, on the 15th day of the 7th month, the day of Shakbon, there was a woman in extreme poverty. Unable to offer food for her ancestors, she took the outer fabric of a light-colored silk robe she wore, cut it into pieces, placed them in a pottery tray, covered it with a lotus leaf, and brought it to the Aizo temple. There she bowed deeply in worship, wept, and left the offering behind. Later, people who found the tray, curious about what she had left, uncovered the lotus leaf and found a poem written upon it. I humbly offer to you just the dew upon the lotus leaf. Look upon this with compassion, O Buddha of the world. Upon seeing this, everyone was moved with deep pity. No one knew who the woman was, and thus the story ended there. Thus the story has been passed down. Title: The Final Poem of the Wife of Minamoto no Dōsai, Governor of Chikuzen. Once upon a time, there was a man named Minamoto Dōsai, the governor of Chikuzen, who was highly skilled in composing Waka poetry. During his time as governor, a man in his service brought his wife, whom he had lived with for many years, from the capital to accompany him in the province. However, after some time, the man became infatuated with a local woman and, abandoning his former wife, made the new woman his wife, forgetting entirely about his first wife. The first wife, now stranded in a foreign land with no recourse, told her husband, "I no longer ask you to live with me as before. All I ask is that when someone travels back to the capital, you send word for them to take me with them." However, her husband paid no heed to her words and eventually stopped reading even the letters she sent. He moved into the house of his new wife, leaving the original wife behind, and no longer cared whether she lived or died. Overwhelmed with sorrow, the first wife soon fell ill. Alone in her desolate house, she had no food and no one to care for her. Despite her illness worsening, there was no one to turn to. Lying in her sickbed, she felt abandoned and helpless, far from home. A young maid who had come with her from the capital was her only companion, and she sent this girl to inform her husband of her dire condition. Yet, even this message went unheeded. As days passed and her illness became terminal, the woman, filled with despair at her impending death in a foreign land without any loved ones, wrote a trembling letter with what little strength she had left. She entrusted it to the maid and sent it to her husband. The maid took the letter to the governor's residence, where the husband was living. He glanced at the letter, said, "I've heard but sent no reply and offered no help. The maid, heartbroken, returned in tears. One of the samurai who served the husband out of curiosity picked up the abandoned letter and read it. The letter contained the following poem. How sad! There is no world where I will live longer. Only a fleeting drop of dew remains, soon to vanish in words. The samurai, moved by the depth of the woman's sorrow, thought, what a cold and heartless man he is. Feeling deeply for the woman, the samurai decided to show the letter to Governor Minamoto no Dōsai. Upon reading the poem, Dōsai summoned the husband and asked, what is the meaning of this? The husband, unable to deny the truth, confessed everything in detail. The governor, enraged, said, you are a man of such cold and inhuman heart. He then sent someone to check on the first wife, but by the time they arrived, she had already passed away, without even the maid by her side. Upon hearing this, Dōsai, who was a man of great compassion, was deeply saddened. He reprimanded the husband, saying, I deeply regret having trusted and valued you all these years. You are not even a human being. He stripped the man of his position and privileges and banished him from every place he had stayed, driving him out of the province under the guard of the governor's men. Dōsai then arranged for the wife's body to be treated with dignity, sending monks to perform rites and ensuring her proper burial. The husband, with no place left to turn and not even allowed to return to his new wife, boarded a ship bound for the capital, penniless and disgraced. Such is the fate of those without compassion. It is said that Governor Minamoto no Dōsai, known for his kindness and poetic talent, was a man who understood the human heart and cared deeply for others. Thus, the story has been passed down. The Tale of Akazome, the wife of Oe no Masahira and her Waka poems, Chapter 51. Once upon a time, the wife of Oe no Masahira was a woman named Akazome, the daughter of the nobleman Akazome no Tokimachi. She gave birth to a son named Kyoshu. Kyoshu grew up to be an accomplished scholar of the literary arts, eventually serving the imperial court and rising to the position of governor of Izumi province. When Kyoshu went to his post in Izumi, he took his mother Akazome with him. However, Kyoshu unexpectedly fell ill and suffered for many days. As his condition worsened, his mother was filled with grief and despair. With no other recourse, she offered a sacred staff at the Sumiyoshi shrine, praying for her son's recovery. She inscribed the following poem on the offering shaft. Life I do not cling to, even if it may change, yet parting from you is a sorrow beyond words. That very night, Kyoshu miraculously recovered from his illness. Another time, when Kyoshu sought a higher office, Akazome recited a poem and presented it to the Takatsukasa regent. I brush the snow from my hair, for I fear it may vanish. I hurry, knowing the first sign of spring may fade too soon. The regent was deeply moved by the poem and granted Kyoshu the position of governor of Izumi. In another instance, Akazome, learning that her husband Oe no Masahira had fallen in love with the daughter of the priest of the Inari shrine, was left alone for a long time. Filled with sorrow, she sent the following poem to Masahira while he was at the priest's house. The pine at my dwelling has no signs for you to follow. If you are to pass, would you not seek it once more? Upon receiving this poem, Masahira, feeling ashamed, returned to Akazome and ceased visiting the priest's house. Thus, the story has been passed down.